I think it's a combination, how I got to this place of not only understanding the power of what we eat, but also the power of the things we eat can impact on our environment. It can impact on our treatment of animals. So it's a combination. And it started from my personal journey of experiencing type 2 diabetes. When I was first diagnosed, I was at a very severe state that caused me to lose vision in my left eye, had permanent nerve damage in my hands and feet, as well as high A1C, was an indicator of your blood count, and also other symptoms, high blood pressure, high cholesterol. And the doctors told me I was going to be on medicine the rest of my life, and that eventually I was going to lose my sight. And it wasn't until I started examining some of the alternative methods of dealing with diabetes is opened an entire universe of the power of food. And so I met some great doctors who believed in disease reversal, Dr. Greger being one of them that wrote the book on How Not to Die, Dr. Esselstyn from the Cleveland Clinic. And I went to visit him, and he told me it was about food. And 3 weeks after reversing my diet, going to a whole food plant-based diet, my vision came back, and 3 months later, my diabetes went in remission. The nerve damage went away, as well as normalizing my cholesterol, my blood pressure, and no medicine was needed. And I started to see how did we start to produce food, how we treated animals, and what was the impact on our environment around our overconsumption in meat. And it was just a game changer for me, as the new documentary stated. It was just a game changer that we're connected to what we eat, not only how it impacts our mothers and our fathers, but how it impacts Mother Earth.
Obviously, you mentioned that you went vegan basically for health reasons, and it improved your health. And you mentioned there as well about the kind of animal rights, animal welfare side. How much does that kind of play a part in your current veganism?
A lot. It's part of the advocacy we're doing here in our office around getting milk out of our schools, moving our city to a place where we're no longer purchasing processed meat, which is an amazing feat in a small amount of time that we have been pushing this advocacy here from Borough Hall, moving to some of our schools to look at what we're feeding our children that is really creating the environment and causing a lot of our healthcare crises. And so people are seeing the connection. How we treat animals is how we treat our children, how we treat our families. And that's part of our advocacy of looking at a more humane way, everything from what we consume to even examining how we do our experiments in our labs. Do we have to use frogs or other animals to do so? We believe we can change our mindset on the fair treatment of animals.
How does your kind of philosophy, in terms of a vegan philosophy, work with your kind of political work? Because I imagine there is quite a lot of pushback on various sides.
It's the philosophy of what we're doing around plant-based and veganism. I think it goes hand in hand because people are now starting to look at these cities that they're living in, and they're making a connection. That is so important because the message was always there, but I believe the messenger was not familiar to the people who were being impacted by the conditions of their cities. So when we engage in a conversation about the environment and we think only of fossil fuel, it's about showing, no, it's more than fossil fuel. It is our overconsumption of meat. And then when people start looking at the overconsumption of meat, they start to look at how we treating animals on farms, how we treating chickens that are caged in small spaces, pigs, and how we were able to really deal with the foie gras incident, the forced feedings of geese. And so people are starting to make the connection. They're first looking at their personal lives and saying, wait a minute, you mean I'm diabetic because of the overconsumption of meat? And then they're connecting that we're actually treating animals this way. And I think it is what's really starting the dialogue. Historically, people were not caught up in making that connection. I believe they're doing so now.
You mentioned the foie gras ban. Obviously, the political system here has seen a lot of, I guess, vegan-friendly policies put through, like foie gras, like the fur ban. What can you tell me about them and how you see that?
I believe they're moving forward. I believe sometimes the advocacy comes from a grassroots level, and many of the elected officials who are brought in office, they bring their passion and commitment. You have Councilman Cabrera, who's also a vegan. Now he's in the room. You have men and women who are in the room who also hold on to this same philosophy that we have to start being humane, not only how you treat human beings, but how you treat all living beings. And so it is really an ocean liner being turned around to move in the right direction. The first order of business is to get the right captain at the helm so they can start moving in the right direction. And you're seeing that every day on the state level and on the city level.
One of the things that has been in the news over the last year or so was the New York fur ban. It caused a bit of controversy in terms of, from a cultural point of view, some people felt that fur was important to them in terms of the African American community and the Jewish community. How does that sit with you?
It's important to me that as we make these changes, being equitable is important. The current legislation called for the ban, but not for one community because of religious practices and not because of something that was in their religious text. You can't do that. If we're going to do a fur ban in this city, it must go across all lines, and we must be consistent whatever we do. It must be one set of rules, and we want to continue to engage in the conversation that any ban that we do in this city is implemented fairly, and I want to be part of that dialogue and part of that conversation.
You are a former policeman. Within the vegan circles, there is a lot of protest and direct action. I think we even saw it with animal rights activists taking the stage when Joe Biden was giving his speech on Super Tuesday. How do you kind of view that as someone that is a vegan and a former policeman?
I don't believe in disorder of any type. Even when I'm part of the civil rights struggle around stop and frisk in the city, I was extremely aggressive about that. I think you do it in a peaceful manner. I think what separates our country from other countries is that we have a mechanism in place where you peacefully show your level of demonstration. Moving on the stage to be aggressive about coming towards a presidential candidate, that is a very dangerous situation to do. We saw what has happened historically when Senator Kennedy was shot because someone came to the stage. A Secret Service agent is not aware of exactly what a person is attempting to do, and that can cause great harm to that individual and other people in the audience. I don't believe that level of aggressive behavior is something that I will participate in. I am extremely cautious about disorder, and that comes from not only my law enforcement background, but part of the civil rights activism that I've participated in throughout my life has always been a Dr. King mindset of finding a peaceful way to get your point across. We have been successful in many areas, and I think we could be successful in this area as well.
The horse that collapsed in Central Park, you obviously posted about it on social media. Do you think there should be an investigation into that?
Yes, I do. I believe it should be, and I also will reach out to my advocates in the vegan movement to cross communicate. That at the same time that the horse collapsed in Central Park, I was on Pennsylvania Avenue in Brownsville to talk about two young children that were struck and killed by vehicles. One of them may have been speeding. And, some of the comments that was made on social media, which I believe sometimes can get sort of very aggressive, people were talking about the concern of the collapse of the horse, and they were just really ignoring the fact that we lost two babies in our community. Humanity is humanity. A life is a life, and a living being should be treated with the same level of significance. And so when we are vociferous about the loss of an animal, human beings are also animal, and we need to show the same level of compassion. And the vegan movement should be part of the movement, adding their voices when two innocent people, children to be exact, were killed that same time period. And we don't hear often from those who are saying, let's protect animals, and we should never forget that human beings are animals as well.
Talking about the kind of horse and carriage incident, do you think that horse and carriage rides should be banned in New York City, as they have been in places like Montreal? And I think Mayor de Blasio originally said that he was looking to ban them when he was first elected.
And I believe there should be room for conversation to see how do we transition out, how do we look at the full impact. It's a place that I have not spent a lot of time in researching. I think we need to modernize our methods of how do we move people around in Central Park and in tourism, and that's something I am really open to engage in a conversation around.
And I believe that you are the son of a butcher, is that correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Did you ever imagine that you would one day be completely meatless?
No, not at all. I could not imagine that at all. Meat was such the center of our diet, and that is why it's important that we have a very civil conversation, because if someone would have come to me and stated and yelled at me, screamed at me, didn't talk to me, and shared with what meat was doing to me, I would not have been receptive to hearing them. And it is part of that conversation, having the right message, the right entry point. And I didn't start out being a protector of animals. I started out with being a protector of myself and my sight. You evolve and you grow. Some people reach a point prior to others, but because we are a certain place, we should not abandon people that are not there. We should meet people where they are and take them where they ought to be. People met me as being a son of a butcher that had meat as the center of his life. They took me to where I am right now.